Great. Should be able to see it now. Thanks everyone for joining our event. My name is Kibala Bauer. I'm a senior manager at the GSMA Mobile for Development program, and I'm joined by Christophe Bocquet from Dalberg Data Insights. And today we will present the key findings from our new report, Innovative Data for Urban Planning, the Opportunities and Challenges of Public-Private Data Partnerships. First, I'll briefly give a program overview, talk through the report's objectives from our perspectives, and then I'll hand over to Christophe, who will give an overview of the key insights from the report. He'll then hand over back to me, and I'll briefly talk about the role of mobile big data in the context of COVID-19, and then we'll conclude and hand over to Perry for the panel discussion. So the GSMA represents the interests of mobile operators worldwide. And within the GSMA, we have a Mobile for Development Foundation, which is mostly funded by UK aid, which drives innovation in digital technology to reduce global inequality. Within Mobile for Development, our digital utilities program enables access to affordable, reliable, safe, and sustainable urban utility services through digital solutions and innovative partnerships. And we define utility services as energy, water, sanitation, waste management, and transport. In terms of our program activities, we have a series of research and insights projects we engage in, but we also catalyze and help innovators scale through grant funding. We also facilitate partnerships between innovators and corporates, as well as innovators and mobile operators. We also provide technical advice to mobile operators, municipalities, and utility service providers on innovative partnership models and the role of digital innovation in improved urban utility service provision. We also, in the GSMA, have a team called the AI for Impact Initiative, and its aim is to delivering public-private partnership to sustainably scale mobile big data analytics and AI globally. It has a global task force and advisory panel, and it operates based on the notion: think globally, act locally. Because as we will see throughout the insights that are shared from the report, to really drive partnerships that leverage mobile big data, you have to have your feet on the ground, and you have to act locally and build partnerships. Sorry, next slide. Yes, I would really encourage everyone to check out some of the resources from the AI for Impact initiative, in particular the digital toolkit, which provides a lot of insights on the role of mobile big data in various use cases. Now to the subject matter of our report and why we wanted to dig deeper on this particular subject. From our perspective, cities in low and middle income countries are rapidly transforming. On the one hand, due to rapid urbanization, African and Asian cities account for 90% of urban growth from now until 2050. Then there's the challenge of climate change, which means that cities have to rapidly adapt to external shocks. And then there's also a massive challenge, which is urban inequality, as many low-income urban populations in low and middle-income countries tend to live in informal settlements. And data scarcity is a key challenge for policymakers when they try to think about urban planning tools, but then also improved utility service provision that can actually reach low-income populations. Here, just briefly lining out our study objectives. One of the key things we wanted to do is kind of go beyond the hype that surrounds big data often and identify across which contexts and use cases mobile big data and data from private innovators can actually add value, with a particular focus on obviously our priority sectors and wider urban planning use cases. So that's the first element. And the second element is to highlight the key barriers and enablers of public-private data partnerships across contexts and use cases. This is really important to pay attention to different sectors, but then also obviously country and city dynamics that might play a role. Then thirdly, providing insights into how private sector stakeholders can assess, navigate, and complement the public sector's existing digital capacity without perpetuating data silos and creating sort of separate separate data silos that aren't really, can't really be used by the public sector for other use cases. And then lastly, understand how different stakeholders in this wider data ecosystem can help accelerate public-private data partnerships and unlock what we believe is untapped potential in this space. Now I'll hand over to Christophe, who will summarize some of the key findings from the report.
Thank you very much, George, and hi, everyone. My name is Christophe. I'm working at Dalberg. I'm based out of Nairobi, and I've been focusing on data for social impact over the last 7+ years. Really happy to be here today to give you a bit of sense of what we have discovered in this report. And maybe quickly starting with the scope of the report and especially the different pillars that we've built on in order to draw the different insights available. So as you can see, we conducted a fairly exhaustive stakeholder outreach with 40+ interviews of different stakeholders across different organizations. Of course, we also conducted a comprehensive desk review. And then last but not least, this report is building on the expertise and the experience of the GSMA AI for Impact team, as well as Dalberg Data Insights, who was part of this report. And then on the right, you can see the key outputs of this work that are actually corresponding very much to the different sections of the report. And we will try to give you a sense of what is out there today. We'll only be able to scratch the surface because you will see that the report is quite large. And so I hope that today I will convince you to actually take a look a closer look at those different components, such as the drivers and incentives, the partnership journey, but also the enabling factors and some of the recommendations that we created. Additionally, in the report, you will find 5 case studies that are spanning across both Africa and Asia. But with this, let me maybe go to the next slide and take a look at what we mean exactly by innovative data, because it's a concept, as you can see, which is at the core of this work. So we've been looking at those data-driven public partnership and exactly this kind of resources that are at the core of them, which is the innovative data sources. And so this is a bit of a maybe an overwhelming visual, but I think there are just 2-3 things that for today are quite important to highlight. The first one is that there are, of course, different categories of innovative data. We've bucketed them in 4 key categories. So the data from the mobile network operator, the data from the remote sensing, the data also from the private utility service provider, and then also another, let's say, category, which is all the different data sources coming from different and various digital services that can be integrated in this process. Another point that is important to maybe remember from this slide is that, of course, this data needs to pass through a fairly long process in order to move from a simple and raw data to actionable insights. And then from those insights to go towards the impact, it needs to be integrated in a decision-making process. And so that's kind of a bit of a summary of the journey for those different innovative data sources. And it's also important to mention that in combination of those innovative data sources, most of the time you realize that they need to be combined with more traditional data in order to build trust, but also to be impactful. And traditional data, think here of more standard statistics data, such as the data sets generated by national statistic offices. Moving to the next slide, we'll just here try to give you a bit of sense of a couple of examples. And of course, there are many more in our report. But as you can see here, again, some of the use cases for those innovative data sets in a context of urban planning and service provision. And as you can see, those different use cases are spanning across, for example, tracking and monitoring, but also policy making, But the innovative data can also be used, for example, for prioritization or to streamline existing activities in a context of urban planning and service provision. So that's to give you a bit of a sense of what we have in mind with those innovative data sets. And maybe now we could take a look at the incentives that are actually pushing the stakeholders to join forces in those partnerships. So going to the next slides, you can see here the haves and needs framework that we created in order to represent some of the drivers for those public-private partnerships. So trying to answer the question why the public and the private sectors are joining forces in those data-driven public-private partnerships. And this is, as you can see, structured in 5 key, let's say, set of components. With on the upper part, you have the combination of private haves and public needs. And on the bottom part, the other way around. So where you have the public haves and then the private needs that are corresponding to those haves. And if you take one example, I will just take the first one. You can see that, of course, in those public-private partnership, you often have the private sector bringing a big data platform. And on the other side, the public sector actually in need of regular, timely, and accurate data to develop policy or actions. And so that's just one out of the 10, I guess, pairs of haves and needs. But that was really one of the important components of our work in order to try to understand the reason why those public-private partnerships are taking place. But maybe in the interest of time, we can maybe move already to the next slide, taking a look at the journey. And so here we are trying to answer the question of how those partnerships actually take place and what kind of stages do they include and how does it unpack in reality. And one of the key takeaway that we got from our work is that there is no one size fits all. There is no like kind of one journey framework that is working for all the partnerships, the data-driven partnerships, but there is rather key stages, like you can see here, 4 of them, that are connected in the non-linear manner. And so you can see, for example, that we, of course, have the establishment of the partnership with different set of activities. We have the management of the data, which is, of course, also at the core of this kind of partnership. But then you also have the impact and the usage of the innovative data, usually leading to evaluation and sustainability of this partnership. And so again, this is a framework and a piece of research that is very much unpacked in the report, but that we can only give you a quick glimpse into for the sake of this webinar today. And I would propose then to go to the next slide and take a look at some of the challenges and enablers that we analyzed. So that was another important part of the work that we conducted. We tried to understand a bit what are the kind of challenges and enablers on the way of those data-driven public-private partnerships. And we identified 4 different categories of challenges and enablers. You can see that the first one is what we call the engagement model. So this is fairly, I would say, straightforward in the sense that it's really looking at the stakeholders that take part in those public-private partnership, the financial model and agreements, the way the different processes are in place in the different organizations in order to drive the partnership. Another category of challenges and enablers is the data and the technology. So we know that we are talking here about data-driven partnership. And so, of course, taking a look at the nature of the data that is available, but also the literacy and the capacity of the different members of the partnership, as well as the tools, the infrastructure, the hardware, the software that are leveraged in the partnership in order to make the best out of the data that is shared between the 2 parties is a key component in order to drive those partnerships forward. The third component that we looked at is the regulation and the ethics. And here, I think it's a component that is becoming more and more important with time, because our awareness, of course, of the importance of the protection of the data is increasing. And as we can see in the report, in the low and middle income countries also, this awareness is getting bigger, and it's often really important for those partnerships to put it at the core of the exercise and make sure that the partnership is respecting the different data governance from the different parties, but also the data regulations that are in place in the geographies relevant to the partnership. The final component here of challenges and enablers is the indirect motivators. And so this one is actually a group of challenges and enablers that are not, let's say, directly or formally part of the partnership, but that usually have an impact on the partnership itself. And so take the example of the digital strategy. Very often the different parties, both the public and the private, have a digital strategy. Sometimes that strategy is a bit more formalized, but in all cases, there is actually an agenda that is very own to the different parties in the partnership. And it's important, of course, in terms of enabling the partnership to be successful, to make sure that there is a certain alignment between those different digital strategies. And so that's, again, to give you a quick perspective on those challenges and enablers that are very much explained and unpacked in the report. But maybe I would propose to go to the next slide and take a look at the recommendations that we worked on. And so again, here, this is just a glimpse into what you will find in the report. We structured, for the sake of this presentation, those recommendations across the three, let's say, main stages of a partnership: the establishment, the management, and the sustainability of the partnership. But then in the report, you will also find insights in terms of recommendations that are specific to each of the different stakeholders that we are analyzing. So the mobile network operators, the urban utility innovators, but also the public institutions that are part of those partnerships. And maybe very quickly before closing and giving back the floor to George, I could maybe highlight a couple of recommendations that I found really insightful for me. In terms of the establishment of the partnership, I think that identifying a champion from the public sector to ensure strong buy-in from the public side of the partnership was something that was really important from the different interviews that we conducted and different analysis that we reviewed. In terms of the management and establishment of the partnership, I think the data governance was very often mentioned, and we realized that it is, again, something that is becoming more and more important as we go towards more awareness of the importance of the protection of the data and the respect, for example, of privacy. And then when it comes to the sustainability of the partnership, I think that the importance of combining both a business case and an impact case for those innovative data source is something that was proven to be extremely important and critical, given the nature of those partnerships, which are both public and private. And with this, I will propose to give back the floor to George. Thank you very much, and looking forward to discussing that further in the rest of the discussion.
Thanks a lot, Christophe. And as you mentioned, some of the points, like the stakeholder-specific recommendations, or some of the deeper aspects of the enabling factors, can be discovered in the report. So I really invite you to look into that, because it goes more in depth on some of these points that we had to obviously summarize for this. I wanted to quickly touch base on the role of mobile big data before I pass on to Perry during the COVID-19 pandemic, because we think this is an important catalyst for data sharing partnerships going forward. I really invite you to look at the report from our AI for Impact team, which gives a bit of some insights on the role the GSMA played during the pandemic, and that mobile operators played in assisting governments in their response to COVID-19. And as you can see, we had kind of 4 different components on our work on COVID-19, from global insights to stimulating public-private collaboration in low and middle income countries between mobile operators and health authorities, and also working a bit on privacy and ethics in the context of sharing mobile big data during a pandemic, and other sort of knowledge sharing activities. Here's an overview of some of the implementations of where in cases where mobile operators helped governments in their response to COVID-19, for instance, with population movement data, but also with other use cases, such as helping governments identify who are the most in need for sort of cash transfers in the context of lockdowns, such as the case in Nigeria with MTN. And just to give a brief overview of the process that we underwent when we approached different countries, such as Burkina Faso or the Democratic Republic of Congo, for instance. It was important to first identify the need, understand the country landscape, build our own knowledge base, to then move to understand how we can translate data into actionable insights, and then for those insights to also be used actually by policymakers to deliver different policy interventions. So it's interesting because some of these points that we've identified on our work on COVID-19 are also reflected in our report on urban planning, and we hope that through a lot of these partnerships that were being built between mobile operators and public sector stakeholders, that a lot more public sector stakeholders have kind of understood the potential of mobile big data, have increased digital literacy with regards to using mobile big data, and hopefully that will stimulate and catalyze more partnerships going forward. So if you would like to stay in touch and follow our work going forward, please look at the GSMA Digital Utilities team website. You can also check out some of the work of our AI for Impact team under the website that I mentioned. And please read our report and give us feedback. We'd love to hear what you think. You can, if you can't wait, you can quickly use this QR code to download the report, but you can also find it through our website. And now I'll pass on to Perry to moderate our great panelists.
Terrific. Thank you so much, George and Christophe, for the introduction and the terrific overview of your report on innovative data for urban planning. Some of the stuff you were saying just now really resonated, particularly around the role of partnerships and the role of finding pathways for social and business impact that can really bring us to solutions. And thanks to everyone who's here today. I see people are signing in from all over the globe. We have pretty good global representation on the panel, but I appreciate your tuning in. A few housekeeping notes. A link to the report is posted, and George showed it to you, but it's also in the chat. And there will be a complete recording of this event available online soon. As I'm speaking to these super smart panelists, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. They'll be forwarded to me so we can continue the conversation and make sure we're making the most of their experience. So my name's Perry Hewitt, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Data.org. A few words about us. Data.org is a platform for partnerships building the field of data science for social impact. We believe there's tremendous opportunity, as George was saying, for data and data science to advance the social sector, not only through pure investment, but also through a fundamental reimagining of the way technology is created and how it's deployed. With an interdisciplinary and inclusive focus, we aim to lift up exemplary use cases for scale and replication. And a great example of this is one of our panelists today, a Data.org Inclusive Growth and Recovery Challenge awardee. We aim to build capacity in individuals and organizations to increase the number of purpose-driven data professionals and to ensure there's organizational understanding and bandwidth to work with those professionals. And finally, Data.org, we aim to support the creation of a commons, digital public goods that are available to a global community of data science for social impact practitioners. Now, to set the stage today, we have 2 quick poll questions for you to help us tailor our conversation. We want to bring those up. First, here's the easy one. Are you part of a data sharing partnership today? I can respond. I'll give a moment. Great. And next, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing innovative data sharing in low and middle income countries? Okay, so we've got the results on the first one. Looks like most, a substantial amount, maybe 35%, 33% are part of one. But let's go to the second question. So what do you see as the biggest challenge facing innovative data sharing in low and middle income countries? Is it data scarcity, insufficient data, as Christophe mentioned? Is it data silos? Finding the right partner to work with? How do you gauge who's the right partner? How do you align your incentives to make sure you can work together? Is it sustaining those partnerships over time? Is it lack of funding or other? And we'll give another minute for people to respond. All right, let's close it up. Excellent. Okay, so a lot looks to be about data silos. So when you get the data, where does it reside? How do you make sure the data talks to one another? And lack of funding, of course, is a close number two. How do we advance in an underinvested social impact sector? And how do we make sure those investments are in the right areas? So thank you for that. I think data silos is a theme we see repeatedly as well. So I appreciate the feedback. So now I'm going to turn over to our wonderful panelists who are kind enough to join us. And they're bringing hard-won experience, a really specific, actionable experience to share with you today, and their perspectives. And they're coming, as I said, from many different time zones. So thanks to everyone for being here. I'm going to ask each speaker to introduce themselves and their role in organization as they answer this first question. The question is, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for innovative data resources related to development in low and middle income countries? And I'll start with you, Han.
Thanks so much, Perry, and thanks so much to everyone for putting this report together. It's incredibly exciting. So my name is Han Sheng, and I lead innovation at Give Directly. Before jumping in to the question, let me just give some context about Give Directly. We're a nonprofit that does just one thing. We deliver cash unconditionally to families living in poverty around the world. And at the start of the pandemic, we were looking at a very scary projection. 120 million people were about to be thrust into extreme poverty because of the pandemic. And as we looked at this scary number, we knew that our conventional approaches to going door to door to screen, enroll, and pay people in need was just not going to work because of social distancing measures and because the scale of the crisis, again, 120 million people, was just so large. And so to Perry's point here about what is the most exciting, innovative data sharing opportunity is actually one that we were looking at and exploring before the pandemic, and that we deployed at scale during the crisis. Prior to the pandemic, we had been working with telcos, MNOs in East Africa, actually with Dalberg Data Insights, the team that Christophe is from, to figure out how to work with MNOs to not only pay individuals through mobile money, so that that is now incredibly prevalent, being able to send people money via text, but to do two more things: to identify subscribers in need, subscribers living in poverty, and enroll them, and then finally pay them. So it's all three steps, I think, is the new innovation here that we were testing prior to COVID, and then really implemented at scale during the crisis. And so, the last thing I'd just say here is that when I talk about scale, I'm super excited to be able to say that not only did we demonstrate this in East Africa, we launched a big program in Togo with a very forward-looking digital ministry and pushed 140,000 payments to 140,000 people that were identified, enrolled, and paid using telco data, using CDR data to predict those who are most in need and most in poverty. And so I think that to me, that the paradigm shift here, moving away from just thinking about relationships with telcos as payment providers, but also the identification and enrollment platforms, is to me the most innovative and exciting overlap of our work.
Terrific, thank you. And it seems like you were able to work quickly, both on your own with governmental and private sector partners, when this crisis emerged, to be able to act on that. So agility was part of the answer. So Titi, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for innovative data resources? And please feel free to introduce yourself. I think you're on mute. Tell us a little bit about your role and the biggest opportunity you see. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Perry. My name is Titi Kanti Lestari. I am from BPS Statistik Indonesia. It's a statistic office in Indonesia. I think the biggest opportunity, because we are a government office where we are lack of a budget, especially, and then a traditional approach like survey, it's cost quite a lot. So this is why, and then also respondent burden. When we do survey or something, we already have kind of like 248 surveys, and then each household at least have 2 or 3 surveys. Sometimes they can, we knock the door and then ask the household. So that's another thing, and then also work burden. In some survey, we employ enumerators. So, and then that's quite difficult for them. Like there is overlay between survey, and then that's before COVID. But now during COVID, our enumerator has been declined by many households, and that is why. We are lucky that we already employ mobile data since 2016. So now we use mobile data as replacement and also complement for our survey. So kind of like integrated with other, and then some are replacement. That is all. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. No, that's helpful. So, you had costly surveys and were able to leverage mobile data, both in addition to, and in, and where you had to in replacement of. So that's terrific. Ju, where do you see the biggest opportunity?
Thank you so much, first of all, to everybody, and I say hello to everyone. My name is Ju Young-jeon. I'm Orange Business Services and the Mobile Data Analytics product from Orange Group side. So I'm product manager. I'm based in Paris. So from my side, what is the most impacting and the biggest opportunity in this scope is we can go faster. It means whatever we can discover dealing with the data, when we can discover, we can try to apply as quickest as possible in independently, low income or developed countries, wherever we can deploy quickly. By being fast, we can save lots of lives in terms of epidemics, because we can provide data which can be useful and which can be applicable. To do so, I have seen lots of collaborations, connections can be sparked. Like everybody wants to collaborate together around one motivation. So what I have been mostly appreciable and impactful from my own experience is when you can smartly use the data and the knowledge and their willingness and some financial power can be gathered, we can do the things we thought we cannot reach out in 10 years, 20 years. We could create for 3 months or 6 months the project term. That is most delightful, as well as most biggest opportunity I can discover during this COVID, as well as around the mobility data.
That's great, thank you. So you were able to collaborate and move with speed, not two terms that always go together. So that's very refreshing to hear.
Yeah,
excellent.
Definitely.
So we're going to deep dive a little bit with each panelist. Again, I'll urge people to share questions in the chat if there are areas you hope we'll cover. First, a question for Titi. So there were, as Christophe mentioned, 5 terrific case studies in the report, and there was one about the robust public-private partnership between BPS, where you lead information technology and tourism statistics, and Telkomsel, the large mobile network operator. You have a relationship dating back to 2016. And you were able to very recently collaborate with data sharing to delineate clearer boundaries for Checkgang Badung. Can you explain how you work together to make this work? What were some of the advantages and limitations of mobile big data, and why is it important, as you alluded to in the beginning, for statistical departments in low and middle income countries to understand the potential of mobile big data? Thanks.
Thank you, Perry. Yes, we start 2016. At the time, the first one is in tourism statistics. So to develop, to complement the tourism statistic from the immigration data. So previously we used survey, but now we didn't use survey. And then because of the concept, usual environment, so that's a usual environment is become commuting. So we put it together in that. In the partnership, in my opinion, the first one is trust. So we have to trust them, and they have to trust us, because they have trust from the subscriber that they will not leak the subscribers' data. So they have to they have to trust us that our data scientists will not leak the subscriber data. So, and then also the second one is kind of like marriage, actually, trust and what else? Yeah, the important thing is actually trust. And then when we first use the data, actually we don't know that's what animal is mobile data. So our data scientists actually a bit like, because they usually work with survey data. Lucky that mobile data is more structured, but the data is quite big, very big. That's also the problem. So for our data scientists, they kind of like find a new Lego they can play around. That's, yeah. And yeah, the important is trust, because like the data should be hashed first, and then our data scientists use NDA. So it's not all our in my team that work with telco, only about 8 or 9 people. That's with different, because we have kind of like work with tourism, commuting, which become the delineation of the city, and also ICT data. So that's our experience. Thank you.
Great. Now, when you started, TT, working with that data, did you have the team you needed? Did you have to upskill, or, I know you had data scientists, but how did you ensure you were able to process what sounds like from structured but very big data?
Our data sets already learned about Python, about R or something like that, PySpark. But when they face the mobile data, first they have to train. So we asked other company. I searched first. Then we found that no countries that apply mobile data first. So we found out that Estonia is the first one for official statistics. For research, is allowed more than 20 or something, but for official statistics, it's quite different, because quality assurance is more important. So we asked a company to come to train our data scientists, and then also data scientists and telco.
Great, thank you. I think that kind of capacity building, both for individual data sciences and organizations, is critical to a lot of this success, because if the data exists, but we don't have the bandwidth to process it through people or organizations, we still face a really big challenge. So yes. Now to Jahan. So I know that one of Christophe's initial, when he was sort of cherry picking the recommendations from the report, one of the ones he focused on was this idea of champions. And I know you sort of exemplify that at Give Directly, where you formed a strong partnership, as you said, with a forward-looking digital ministry, the government of Togo, which has really enabled you to do this innovative direct cash delivery. you formed a powerful working relationship with the champion. I've seen you speak with them and engage with them and, obviously get tremendous results. So how did you initially form that? And then what do you attribute the enduring success of that partnership to? Thanks.
Absolutely, that finding a champion is just so incredibly important to driving these PPPs. I think there's a guiding mantra that a friend once told me, who was in a senior position in New York City government, and she said, "Good policy plus politics equals impact," right? And so for technocrats around the world, often, and I count myself as one, we often spend hours and hours and hours designing beautiful programs. But it's really a combination with politicians and being able to leverage the agenda setting power of politicians to combine good design and good policy to be able to deliver the rapid impact, I think, that some of my panelists have have touched on as well. And so, the team behind Togo's Novisi program. Novisi is the program that is the name for the cash transfer program that they developed. We had two types of champions that were very policy oriented, very technically oriented. So their chief technology officer is phenomenal, but also with senior level political buy-in at the ministerial level, who were also incredibly conversant and incredibly knowledgeable on every single policy option in front of them and how data can be leveraged to make more informed decision making. And so I think that was really, really valuable. And how Give Directly and our research partners, UC Berkeley, came in was that, you have policy and politics leading the fore, and we are contributing as experts, as academics, as fundraisers, to help inform and shape that policy and that PPP. And so I think that combination, everybody having a very clear role, but all marching to the tune of policy and politics, I think is really important. I think the final thing I'll touch on is the same thing I think that TT mentioned and that Perry, you touched on. Having capability, having hard technical capability and skills, and being able to bring that to the fore is so important. And so, Perry, you mentioned the Data.org challenge. At the beginning, we are very grateful beneficiaries of the challenge. With that funding, we have been able to develop and hire cutting edge data scientists who have worked with UC Berkeley to take research into implementation and support that policy impact for politicians around the world. So we're so incredibly excited. That to us is the formula: policy, politics, and technical expertise together.
And that's what makes it replicable, right? Lets you go beyond one champion in one country to think about. I know you have, broader expansion goals, over the years. So that's how you think you can take it to the next level, right?
Exactly. We don't want to design a system where it's just about relationships, right? Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I think a really key distinction here is that government and governance are two separate things. And what you want to be able to have replicable is a governance framework driving towards policy and politics that makes it replicable in country to country.
Terrific, thanks. Finally, over to Ju. One of the takeaways I had from the report was industries that are really we have these expanding communities, these sprawling cities in low and middle income countries, and how can data help? It seems like three clear areas are energy, sanitation, and transport. I know Orange has invested a lot in transport data, and in Senegal, Flux Vision had partnerships around mobile big data that tracked mobility changes during events like floods, holidays like Ramadan, and was even used to forecast the impact of a new bus station. So really trying to using mobile data to tackle the problems of sprawling cities that are struggling with transport issues that include pollution, congestion, and just a high number of accidents. So what were some of the data challenges you faced, and how did you set up the rules, the governance for sharing, aggregating, or deriving insights from the data, in particular to help the transport sector?
I think first of all, as well said by Han as well, I think championship and their partners and their policy and governance governor. I think there is a part of the things which has to be clear. It means when we are going to propose something, the comprehension and the understanding about what it means data has to be commonly understood in the same way. So that is the most important part when it has to take the speed up. The government bodies are not data scientists. We understand fully. But when they are ready to catch up with their new ideas and how we can usefully use this data, and as well, their mobility data is not going into their data privacy or personal privacy. The MNOs data providers, we can largely anonymize the data and the no tracing whatsoever, protecting fully privacy. Those kind of terms well understood by the government. And from our side of the data scientist can provide the indicators. So mobility data, how their patterns of population moves around. It's very much helpful in epidemics, as well as when we have to propose, as we well said, Perry, transport system. When there's an inundation or natural disaster, or sometimes in African countries, there's a climate change impact the population movement, one side or another, and the season to another season. So those kind of information, the connection, mobility data which can come into, which is under the good comprehension about government, so we can develop as much as possible. So the thing is the understandable, the data scientist insights came into to collaborate with that kind of a good digestion about the information, and which can build up concrete and the sustainable modeling. And I'm coming back to again what has been said before with George and Christophe, to build up and the picking up and the create the break is great. But the first site break setting up, it worked once, it's not enough. It has to go on. So in that site, we need to create not only see into just a brief and the shorten insight, just one shot. No, we have to create as well the private vision as well as the public vision, the sustainability about the modeling. That is what I would like to say, and it's the most difficult part to build up.
So the sustainability is difficult because you need to continually make the case, or because your champions change, or so you're really struggling to sort of story tell about, why the sustainability of the initiatives are important. What's the biggest challenge there?
That's how it comes is as a product manager of Flux Vision, which is our Orange Mobility Data Analytics, we have created from the cellular, from the traffics first. And then we have created the tourism, and then we go into their transport as well, more specialized. Then we have expanded to the retailers. So that is a kind of evolution about the product insights and the data statistics in mobility side. We collaborate with other sectors. We are good in network enabler vision. The information which are coming from the MNOs, we can translate it into the visible and the understandable indicators of mobility, okay? But that is not enough. There's a lot of experts, for example, as well said, water facilities, electricities, or other banking systems, whomever. So they are specialists of their data, understandable data managers. They have to come up together to collaborate, and the right indicators can be created, and they can be the sustainable because public and private interest can be combined. That modeling, which is quite hard work, it's not just one day or another. It can be happen. So there's a discussion, communication, as well have done for the COVID-19 with thanks to the GSMA team, we could create like a task force for TRC. That task force team has not just stayed there. They understood the evolution, what can do more, not just only academics, but what can do more with more data, more artificial intelligence, aggregating other data, how we can cross over, what is the added value. That has become a core energy to push it further, more than just a one-step collaboration. So communication, sharing, popularization. I think that's the most important part, probably, to go further together.
Yeah, no, I think those aligned incentives and communication are absolutely critical. And I really like the way you framed it at the end. So I have a few extra questions to pose to all of you, so jump in. Maybe this first one's best for TT, but anyone else? Geospatial data and analytics play an important role in urban development. So for energy planning, one of the examples in the report, an organization called Frame combined data sets and applied geospatial analysis and machine learning to find sites for the government to deploy. In this case, it was off-grid electrical products. Where do you see the benefits of geospatial data, TT? Are they something that's in your toolbox today or something you're aspiring to?
Thank you, Perry. Yes, actually, it's a very important geospatial because, like in our case, in tourism and also in commuting and other in ICT statistics, we use geospatial data. But we use our working map because Indonesia is vast, and then we use also QGIS and other application for geo analysis and geospatial.
Helpful. Anyone else?
No.
Geospatial analysis is incredibly important for our work. I think as TT mentioned, the traditional approaches to understanding a particular region or geography is through surveys. And that is just wildly time consuming when you have to cover large geographies. The Earth is imaged many times. Every square inch of the Earth is imaged many times a day. And so what the value of geospatial analysis brings is ubiquity, right? Ubiquity of data in a way that traditional survey data just doesn't have. And beyond the ubiquity, the ability to refresh that data set. And so what we've been able to do is in data deserts, in areas where surveys just are not up to date, where we don't have understandings of poverty, of new developments of urban slums, of informal settlements, after a crisis when a hurricane has struck and has destroyed homes, we have been able to, using machine learning on these satellite images and geospatial data sets, immediately identify and predict places that are the poorest, places that have been hardest hit by hurricanes, and then zone in really quickly and deliver cash aid. I remember 4 years ago, I had teams that were scouring satellite images, manually marking out homes. And right now that technology has moved so quickly that we are able to identify building footprints and destroyed homes, cutting down our time for deployment from weeks of manual review to days. And so I think it's geospatial has just been wildly helpful for aid service delivery.
Great. I'm going to take one question from the audience. Thank you. How satisfied are subscribers to data organizations with the use of data obtained from mobile devices? And to what extent do organizations go to obtain this data? So, maybe for Ju, I know you talked about anonymizing data. So do you have any thoughts to share about the role to how individuals perceive it being used? I think Han could tell a good story of individuals happy to get money, but how do you see it as an aggregate sort of a communications challenge for MNOs?
Yeah, just from the Orange side, we are not just operating in African countries, but also we are running our business. I'm there to say I'm setting the Orange Business Services as product manager. So my product in the mobile data analytics should create some benefits. In the side, when we don't satisfy our subscribers, our customers, we cannot carry out. In that way, we have since operating since 2013 in France and 2015, and up to now, we have extended in more than 5 European countries. And during the COVID-19, we could deploy our solution to help and accompany the African countries, AMEA, Orange countries, more than 5 or up to 6, if they wish to have our services. It was free of charge, obviously, in that circumstances. But since the mobility data, when it's anonymized, and I would like to say anonymized in a way, even though we cannot track down the individual behaviors, which is not that much important when you have to set up one hospital where the people have got the most impacted by the epidemics whatsoever, even for the transport. But what you need to see is a tendency. For whole year, as well said Han, whole year or the long-term observation, when you are not going to tracking down the people, but when you can see the trends of the people, how they can move around, recurrencies, how long they stay somehow where, and which time zone there is more traffic and more mobility about populations, we can get rid of the idea of tracking down their individuals. Is there, it means the anonymized population samplings, as well as we are adding up ideas about which can be reflected to the total population. So that is enough from my point of view. So just don't be just trapped about the ideas that we have to track down every single movement. So we have to know every single thing. That is not helpful for the urban organization who has to look at the big groups, I have to say. And obtain this data when it becomes abide by all the privacy, GDPR in European countries as well as African countries. When you are respecting these privacy rules, it's much easier to rule out and getting their subvention or support from the governmental bodies. That is my experience.
Right. And you don't want to take on more than you can process or handle. You want to take the stuff that's actionable, and then it provides the insights. As you said, translating this data into insights is the most important step, and that doesn't get from individual to individual. That's sort of the big picture sampling that you're trying to do.
Yes. And obviously, if I can give you a kind of a very specific example, for example, railway or train operators, they have already their all tickets information from their side, okay? But they don't know how their people come to take the train, how and when, and from where they are coming, definitely, okay? When is the traffic jam is going to be created, from coming where? Right. That kind of information, insights of mobile data indicators, protecting privacy we can provide. And that is your real data and protected data, and they can be provided 365 days, as you well said, instead of putting the people to counting. So let's take it up. The benefits about the technology and the data, innovative data. That is what we are promoting, in fact, as your Orange Mobile Data Analytics product.
Terrific. Thank you. And thanks to all our panelists. I really appreciate that very specific example, because that's the kind of specificity and really unique experience in the field you bring from your perspective as mobile network operators, government entities, and sort of innovative social impact organizations. So a big thank you to all. So a little bit what I heard today was the recurring themes of the availability of data, the ability, whether that's, the data science talent, that Hans recently brought on, or that Titi's brought up in her organization, within organizations to process that data, the importance of strong partnerships with aligned incentives, right? Partnerships can fail unless they have sort of the longevity of shared goals, and continuing to check in and steward those goals are really important. These ring true as well as our work at data.org. We see every day the sort of positive impact of partners in philanthropy, private sector tech, and social impact coming together as we try to build a richer understanding of data science in the social sector and the impact for it to do more. So thank you so much, everyone. And I'll turn it over to George for anything additional he heard as we wrap up today.
Yeah, thank you so much for a fascinating discussion. I think, as you said, sort of the commitment to partnership is key, but I think we've heard a lot of interesting approaches to how we can actually move forward and help a lot of these innovative data sharing partnerships scale in the future. I'd like to thank data.org for co-organizing this event. It's been a pleasure. I'd also like to thank our panelists. The projects you've talked about are all super interesting and fascinating. fascinating, and I feel like they deserve events of their own as well. So I'm looking forward to learning more about them as well. And then lastly, I'd like to invite everyone to read the report. I think my colleague has shared it in the chat function, and please come back to us if you have any questions, ideas for collaboration opportunities, or any feedback you'd like to share as well. We're really keen to learn more. This is an emerging field, and we believe there's a lot to be learned. And as the panelists said, there's also a lot of sharing that we need to do and a lot of knowledge exchange that needs to happen. So really keen to do that and dig deeper on some of the themes that were explored in the report. Thank you all.